David, thank you so much for joining again today.
Thank you, Chris. It's good to be here. I love having these conversations with you. It's one of the highlights of my week. Glad to do it.
So, I'm excited for you guys to get to know my friend David Higginbotham a little bit more. I'll tell you this right up front. One of the things that I love and appreciate about David is he has a big birthday coming up in 2025. He's going to be turning the big 7-0.
That's
And
right.
here's what I love about David that I trust that you'll discover is that he's intentional. He'll be the first to admit that he's not a perfect man. And thank God, perfection is not the goal, progress is the goal. And I love his intentionality with how I've observed over the past more than a decade now the rhythm of how he lives his life. What do I mean by that? He's intentional. He carves out time to invest in younger guys such as myself to be a
Mm,
great listener, to
mm.
offer perspective, and oftentimes ask them inconvenient, probing questions. And yet, I appreciate your friendship and I appreciate your willingness to add value to others, including myself, David.
Well, Chris, I really appreciate that. I'm honored that you would think those things and blessed by our relationship. I'll just put it that way. You're a blessing to me. What a fine young guy you are, and it's a treasure for my life. It really is. So thank you.
Appreciate that. My pleasure. So share with our listeners today the direction we're headed, because I believe today is mission critical that we pull out our notepad and we lean into this conversation and really listen with an open heart and open mind.
Mm, no, that's really good. The thing I want to talk about today is the how to is about the development of strategic and tactical thinking and tactical plans, strategic plans and tactical plans. And the reason this is important, Chris, is because tomorrow is coming and the next day is coming. And Christmas is just a couple of months, few months away. Spring of next year, the summer of next year is coming. And if you have children, their fifth birthday is on the way, or their 10th birthday, or their 15th, or their 20th. The reason it's important for us to begin to, or to improve at, thinking strategically and then thinking and acting tactically, making strategic plans and tactical plans and weaving those together so that we can be better prepared for the future. The future is coming at the speed of life, my friend. It waits for no one. Wait, I'm not quite ready. Too bad. The deadline is here. And so over recent years, I've had an opportunity to engage with a number of people, particularly about this. You know my background. My background for the first half of my adult life was pastoral ministry and church ministry. The second half of my adult life has been business, in all of it involving sales and service and business development. I'm in the third half of my adult life now, where I've slowed down quite a bit. I'm still involved in real estate, but at a slower pace than I was when I was training agents and doing those kinds of things. And I drive a school bus for a school district. It's a fun thing that I enjoy doing. So I'm working at a much slower pace, but that's appropriate when you're about to turn 70. However, the guys that I've been engaging with are still very much in the heat of the battle, so to speak. And so what we're going to talk about today came out of some conversations and some discussion and some coaching that I've done with some guys who were facing some incredible obstacles as they look to the future with their organizations. A couple of these were pastors and a couple of these were real estate guys. And so I wanted to try to put together some ideas about how to be better prepared the next time this thing comes up. Because you know what, Chris? It's going to come up again. And so one of the things that I tried to introduce to the guys that I've worked with is thinking in terms of two separate streams. One is strategic and one is tactical. Strategic is about looking into the future and to dream about what it could be, to dream about, well, what could we do, or what would it look like if, to begin thinking about my business, to begin thinking about my family. All of these things that I'm talking about apply personally in a family environment, and they apply in business environments and internally as an individual. What could it look like if I read 5 books next year? If you don't ask that, you're probably not going to come up with a question. So strategically is thinking down the road. Strategic thinking and strategic planning is not solving a problem that's immediately in front of me. It might very well help me avoid a problem because of some decisions that I've made while looking down the road and planning for that. Tactical is dealing with something that's in the 365 window. Something that has to be dealt with and has to be responded to within a year. Transmission's going out of my car. I'm limping along with it. Or the air conditioning system in my house is rattling and making noise. The furnace is not working well. Those are the kinds of things that are demanding a response. Tactical thinking is in response to the demand of the crisis or the demand of the issue. And I have to put stuff together. Well, that air conditioner is going to cost $3,500. Ooh, wow. Okay, how are we going to pay for that? Do we have savings here? That is tactical thinking. It is focused on resolving a problem that, if it is not resolved, is going to create a lot more problems. And so tactical thinking is really important. But it's the kind of thinking most of us have grown up recognizing as planning. Not strategic thinking, because most of us haven't had much exposure to thinking 10 years out. I mean, think about this, Chris. Where do you want your business to be in 10 years? What if you could describe your ideal expression of your business in 10 years and do it in 25 words or less, what would it be? Because see, the 10 years is going to come. I'm going to be there on that day in 10 years if I don't die, but if I die, then none of this is going to matter for me anyway. So the future is coming at the speed of life. And 10 years, well, I'll think about that later. Well, you will think about it later if you think about it at all, because now is now and then is later. So what do I want my business to look like? I had a conversation with a mutual friend of ours, probably 12 years, probably 12 years ago, and we were having coffee or talking, and I said, what do you and your wife, I called his wife's name, what do you and your wife have, what plans do you have for the empty nest? What? The empty nest. Your kids are going to be gone here. And well, no, his youngest son at that point in time was probably 12. I said, well, in 10 years, he's going to be 22 and probably on his way out of your home. And he's going to be the last one. You're going to have your first one's going to be gone here in 5. And the next one's going to be gone in 7 or 8. And then this one's going to be gone in 10. What are you doing now to prepare relationally, financially, calendar-wise? What are you planning to do when your relationship and your life changes when the kids are gone? And I got this kind of look. Not sure. We haven't been taught culturally, educationally, and most of the time in family situations to plan like that. And it's one of those things that we need to learn how to do, because the future is coming at the speed of life. So that's what I'd like to talk about today. Should I just go ahead on some things here? What do you think?
Yeah, that'd be great, David.
Okay. Yeah. When you're thinking of 10 years, and 10's an arbitrary number, but it's a good round number, and it's a number that we can pretty much all relate to. When you're thinking about 10 years, you're not planning. You're dreaming, which is why I call it the 10-year dream. You need to have a 10-year dream. Now, my 10-year dream involves living to 80. But there are other things as well. The 10-year dream is about the future and what it could be. and I mentioned this a minute ago, asking questions like, what if? What if? Or could I? Or could we? What could it look like to do this? What could it look like to pursue that? See, the 10-year dream, if you're a business owner, if you're a pastor, if you're in ministry, the 10-year dream is not for your staff. You know, a pastor who is leading a group of people, or a business owner who has a team of people, and when you have those team meetings, that is not a time for you to start talking about your 10-year dream. That they're not involved in it at all. This is something in here for you. This is something between you and your wife, if you're talking family stuff or business stuff. It's about the future now, and it's not something that you need to do or deal with on a regular basis. And I think it probably is the kind of thing that you need to do. One of the ways you need to deal with that in terms of is taking a glance. You know, that glance where you go, And here's what I mean by that. Every month or so, every month or 6 weeks, maybe 2 months, you carve out an hour of time. You schedule an hour of time to glance at the dream. Once a month is a good way to do it. Maybe the first Monday or whatever fits in terms of your schedule, where you purposefully take some time and you think about 10 years from now. You have a notebook where you're keeping notes and things, and it's separate from your calendar. This is where you're going to and talking and thinking out loud about your dream. What if? Could we possibly do that? And write those things out. Just could we possibly buy a motorhome and travel the country? A lot of people do that if they can. So a glance. You take a glance at your dream every month or so. And it's the kind of thing that you're just checking up on it. You know, you maybe 10 times in a year. Okay, 10 times in a year. But there also needs to be a thing where you revisit the dream about every year and a half to 2 years, where you set aside half a day. This is a purposeful thing. This is not something you fit in. This is something that you schedule out if you have that opportunity to schedule. If you don't, then you take a weekend morning, you and your wife go have breakfast and coffee, and you talk about what the dream could be. You revisit those things. Every 18 months to 24 months, you do that. Now, pretty much it would be the kind of thing of, what are the things you want to do when you're revisiting that dream? When you're doing the glance, you're making notes. You're thinking about it. When you revisit, you're reviewing those notes and say, what seems to still fit? So you do that every year and a half to 2 years. And it's simply about highlighting the things that are still sticking in your mind. Talking about what are your current thoughts about these things? Maybe I had an idea, 2 years ago about the dream. It doesn't really hasn't really got sticking with me. So I put that aside. It's taking the time on a regular basis, a little glance every month or two or so, a revisit every 18 months to 2 years, so that you're connecting with it. And you're adding to it and you're subtracting from it. And then you're going to wake up one day and 5 years have come and gone.
I have a question for you, David.
Go for it.
Yesterday I was having a conversation, and the context was we were talking about the future plans for this individual, and the person's a believer, and they made the comment something like, well, I trust that God has a plan, and that it's all going to work out the way God plans for it to work out. And what I was sensing is that, like, hey, I don't need to spend much time thinking about my future because God has already have it all set up and planned. Therefore, I don't really need to give much attention to this. How would you respond with that way of thinking?
At the risk of being snarky, okay? I can be on occasion. I would say, well, I don't think you need to spend much time either. So, you know, an hour a month or every 2 months,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't sound like too much time. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
half a day every 18 months to revisit the ideas to 2 years. So in a 5 year period, you might put together 100 hours in a 5 year period. Does that sound like too much? Now, all
Okay,
at
so
one,
what if they
if
go
they
ahead,
if
finish
they
that
said
thought.
if they said yes, I'd say okay.
Sure.
I mean, that what do you know about your future? Well, not much. What are you
Mm-hmm.
planning for your future? Not much. Do you have insurance on your car? Yeah. Well, then you're planning for your future. Do you have insurance on your house? Well, yeah. Well, then you're planning for your future. Do you have medical insurance? Well, yeah. Okay, then you're planning for your future. You're taking steps of action that can help mitigate challenges and difficulties that come along. Now, I'm not going to try to argue you into this, but I'm thinking you may be thinking it's more than I'm thinking. And as far as trusting God, do you lock your doors at night? Well, yeah. Well, if you trust God and you know God's going to work everything out, why do you bother to lock your doors at night? See, that type of thinking, I think, generally is probably more rooted in someone who just has any idea of what to do. And so the best thing for them to do is just simply avoid it altogether. But that is also an indicator of the kind of responses that generally come up in our society. I don't. That's for other kinds of people. It's not for me. But you know what, Chris? That's you're going to run into that a lot.
I love what you mentioned with life insurance and locking the door. The point is that we are at some level thinking
At
about
some
the future.
at some
And
level.
so it's not a matter of if we are or not. The reality is that we all are on some level.
At some level, and at
Yeah,
some
to the
degree, and
point.
for some degree, and
Mhm.
you know, I mean, if you wanted to go, here's another one. If you wanted to go see the leaves in New England this next fall, what would you do? Well, you would probably go to Google Maps or find an atlas and see, well, where could we go? Well, let's go to this place and this place. You'd do some research. You would find some people who think, oh, the best leaves are in Vermont the second week of October, and you would sort of plan your trip around the good Airbnb or this or that or the other. You wouldn't if you have any workable brain matter, get in your car on the 12th of August, oh, excuse me, on the 12th of October in Kansas City or in Waco, Texas, and head off roughly, it's up that way to Vermont, and you wouldn't just go wing it. You would do some research because you want to have a good experience. And that's an oversimplification, but I'm not suggesting that everybody become an incredibly detailed person who is OCDC kind of controlling individual. That's not what I'm suggesting. I am suggesting this: that 10 years from now you're going to be doing something someplace somehow, and the life that you have then is going to be affected by the decisions and the choices that you've made along the way between now and 10 years from now. I'm simply suggesting that if we give it some thought and we give it some consideration and we have some conversations, it will help us be purposeful about the life that we are living leading up to that 10-year time. And I think ultimately that's going to produce the best results in our lives.
So
So
when you say conversations, that means does that imply that we're not doing this alone or by ourselves?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Particularly if if we're talking a family context, this is not something that you're doing on your own. And surprise, sweetheart, here's what we're doing. Yeah, that might work in some situations, but most situations it's not because um, the people who participate in whatever it is that we're talking about are better participants if they're involved in the process. And it's one of those things that husbands need to learn more often than women. So yes, it becomes it becomes a team effort. Now the team can be 2, the team can be 20. It doesn't generally start as a team effort unless you're if with your spouse you're talking about when the empty nest. What would our life look like when the kids are gone? What do we want it to be? What do we want it to be flavored? Well, it's one thing to start talking about that when you're 10 years out. And if you're having a discussion about that every few months or once a year, you get together and talk and plan or whatever, bringing it up, well, what do you think? Well, let's make some notes of what we might want to pray about or might want to think about. We need to plan for. Will we need a house that's this big? Well, probably. Who knows? All of those discussions are an important part of the process because what you don't want to happen is to be caught off guard and having to make decisions about what you're going to do because you're having to make a tactical decision at that point in time. Tactical decisions are fine. The tactical process is important because it helps to resolve an issue that is right up there in front of us. It's much better if we can prepare for that, dreaming about it 10 years off and starting to have vision about it at 5 years. Because when the 5 year comes around, now we need to start putting some particular vision to that. We've just been dreaming. Wouldn't it be good if, what about this? Well, at 5 years, the strategic vision is when that begins because that's a much closer time. And there are some things that we need to begin to be aware of. I mean, if we are going to sell this house, downsize, and move to Branson, we need to start thinking about that now. Maybe we need to make a trip to Branson and to take a look at what's it going to be like in 5 years. At this time, when you start moving into the 5 year strategy, the strategic vision portion of this journey, you need to start asking some questions, specific questions. I call it the 6 Qs: who, what, where, when, how, and why. I mean, it's that kind of thing of, well, if we were going to move to Branson, where would we go? I mean, why? And first of all, and why? What would motivate us to do that? You see, this is the kind of thing that takes a bit more focus, which is why I suggest scheduling a full day every 6 months or so to revisit this project and to talk about it. You and your wife go away. If it's a business thing, you and a business partner, or perhaps you and your business manager, or if you're a sole proprietor, you by yourself with someone whom you trust. This is the kind of place where you would bring in mentors. This is the kind of place you would bring in people who have some perspective about whatever this arena might be. It's a time for strategic development of your vision. This is not, and I say this again, this is not making plans. This is talking about the vision, but it's being more strategic about the vision. The first 5 years, we were just dreaming. Wouldn't it be great if we stayed near a parachute school so we could learn how to skydive? Okay, maybe. Probably not. But this is, when it's 5 years out, you need to start thinking in more details. Who do we know in that area? Maybe we want to go to New England. We want to live in New England. Maybe we want to live in Texas, or we want to live near wherever the kids are going to be. Brenda and I did that. We made that decision years ago, and we decided that whenever our kids settle down and they start hopefully having grandchildren, we want to position ourselves as close as we can in that general area where we can connect with both and be involved in the lives of our grandchildren. Well, that happened for us a little quicker than we had anticipated. Our son got married, and a few years later, it's like boom, and we were happy in Kansas City. We weren't planning to leave Kansas City at all. Had no plans to leave Kansas City. But you know what? Life comes at us at the speed of life. And so when the reality started coming into clarity, it was like we didn't have to make a decision about this, Chris. We had already decided. The what had been decided. How, where, when, no, those hadn't been decided yet. But we made the transition from Kansas City, a place that we loved and had raised our children for the most part. We moved from Kansas City to Waco, Texas. And we didn't sweat about it. We didn't wring our hands about it. We had already made the decision. We had a strategic plan involved for this segment of our lives. So the doors opened up, and so we just took the step. Now, if we hadn't made that plan, we would have to work through the process of, do we leave Kansas City? Do we go to, do we do that? No, we had already made the choice. And
so you were more on the proactive side instead of reactive. You changed the time frame, but you've already had discussions around that.
Well, strategic planning is proactive at its very core. Strategic envisioning is proactive. Strategic dreaming is proactive. It's giving your attention to the possibilities of what the future could hold, many of which may never come to pass, because things have changed along the way.
Right.
Health has changed. Financial crisis has changed things. Job loss, or any number of things can come along.
Right.
However, being engaged in the process of looking to the future, thinking about the future, dreaming about what the possibilities could be, praying about it if that's a part of your life, discussion, debating, ups and downs, all of that is like working out your muscles. It's like training for a marathon, because you know the marathon is coming. Something could happen that keeps you from participating in the marathon, but you're still going to be better off having been prepared than if you just got up on a Saturday morning and said, hey, that Kansas City Marathon's going on today. I think I'm going to go run.
That'd be painful. More painful.
More painful. Right. So it is about being proactive. It's about recognizing that anything that I would want to put my shoulder to in 10 years, any place I would want to be in 10 years, the probability of that is going to be enhanced by me being engaged in that journey now, whether it's family or business or ministry. It simply doesn't matter. All of them have different nuances to them, of course, but all of them are involved in a very similar process. And the process is this: me recognizing that tomorrow is coming, and January is coming, and spring of next year is coming, and I'm going to be 72, and I'm going to be 75, and I'm going to be 80, should I be blessed to live that long. So how do I want my life? What is that I want to be doing? What do I want my life to be about? How do I want my engagements with other people to be at that point in time? Because I've moved into a very different stage of life than I was in 25 years ago. I was beginning to move into this stage of life when you and I met. I was transitioning out of the stage of life that was highly productive and was building business and those kinds of things. I was starting to transition into that stage of life that's a bit slower. It's a bit more back off just a bit, a different focus and a different purpose. And see the focus and the purpose in my life in terms of the energy where I'm putting out into relationships, into the world. What I'm doing now is this. What I'm doing now is having conversations with you. What I'm doing now is having conversations with our mutual friend and with 6 or 8 or 10 other guys at different places around the country. And it's having conversations about, hey, what's going on in your life right now? Because that is the stage of life that I'm in. But I'm in that stage of life now, and blessed that I'm in that stage of life now, because I began preparing for this stage of life 15 years ago, 18 years ago. And that is strategic. What we're doing now is tactical.
Can you put your finger on when you started thinking about the future, maybe more than you did prior? Like, is there a moment or a life
Yes.
experience that led you to maybe take your future more seriously than you once did?
Yes, it is. It was the summer I turned 40. I
Hmm.
uh, I had been sick with a cough for several months, and typical male kind of thinking, oh, it'll go away, I'll take some NyQuil and it'll be fine. It didn't go away, and it wasn't fine. And I had all the symptoms of someone who was sick, and I had all the responses of some male idiot who was refusing to admit that I was sick. Because after all, I'm 40 years old, I'm bulletproof. Wound up in a hospital, nearly died, spent 11 days in the hospital in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, 6 of that in ICU, and nearly killed me, nearly died. Um, and when I got out of the hospital, they had opened me up. I had an anaerobic abscess in my left lung, and they had to open me up all the way around and clear all my left lung out. They were scooping stuff out of my chest cavity with a scoop. It was that bad. It's hard to. I'm not overselling this either. I'm serious. When the doctor went out to see Brenda, waiting after the surgery, and he said, "Well, we're sure there's no cancer." And she thought I had a severe case of pneumonia. That was a wake up call, Chris. And it was a wake up call that was a long time coming. I had nearly orphaned my children and widowed my wife because of my stupid resistance to recognizing that I was not bulletproof. And I began making a transition out of pastoral ministry and church ministry into business, and began pursuing a different focus of life. And it was in that season of my life, for nearly the next 20 years, that I began learning and applying some of these things in my business and in my personal life, and making the transition to being a person who is not bulletproof, and who doesn't know what he doesn't know. And when you don't know what you don't know, you're in a dangerous position unless you are pursuing understanding. The pursuit of understanding is a really important journey for a guy to make. It's not looking for information, it's looking for understanding about what it means. The application of information, wisdom and understanding working together. And that was very much a part of my life over the next nearly 20 years. Not mastering it, but being introduced to it. And this is the season of my life where I got introduced to strategic thinking and planning, and tactical thinking and planning. And as I came out of that season and moved into this next season of my life that I'm in now, the third half of my life, I began to realize so much of the things that I had learned in that season were applicable to guys in their lives, because they are the age now that I was then. And it was helpful for me to be able to share from my own experience and try to help guys realize you can't be the Lone Ranger. You can't. You're not the cowboy anymore. You're becoming a man. You're becoming a mature man. You've got children who are looking up to you and who are depending on you to be the mature man, because they're not going to become mature adults apart from the engagement that you have with them. and learning how to recognize that life is coming at me at the speed of life. And you know what? It waits for no one. You're going to turn 40 if you live long enough. You're going to turn 50 if you live long enough, and hopefully you will. And not understanding that I need to be thinking down the road. I need to learn how to think about what down the road could be and engage with it and look for wisdom, look for understanding, look for support from a guy who's been down that road further than I have, and begin to learn how to integrate the things that I come to understand and I've learned, the mistakes that I've made. I could fill a book with the mistakes that I've made. See, I'm talking confidently about these things now, but I was regularly running into the wall. I was regularly smacking into the wall. Whoa, I didn't see that coming. Yeah, because you were too focused on the tactical and not on the strategic. Oh, wow. How do I change that? Well, you got to back up and think differently. Seriously, life is a full contact sport, Chris, particularly if you're not walking in wisdom. And I've had years of not walking in wisdom, and so I've learned a few things from the bumps and bruises along the way. I am still learning things from the bumps and the bruises along the way. Because
so how do we walk in wisdom, David?
Well, you walk in wisdom by, first of all, by embracing humility, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand what I don't understand. I don't know what I don't know. Can I get some help? You walk in humility. Humility says, I don't have all that I need. Chris, can I talk with you about something?
Absolutely.
I'm facing this situation here, and I'm frankly, I don't really know what to do. You've got any insight on this? I mean, listen, this is a cultural. It's a cultural weight that we carry. The lone cowboy, John Wayne, riding off into the sunset. You know, that's bogus, man. You know, it's fun for a movie, but it's not fun for life. I don't know what I don't know. I need to understand things that I don't understand. And in my situation, in my life, it was me going, God, will you help me here? I don't know how to be a dad to a teenage boy. I wasn't very good at being a dad to a preteen boy. How am I going to be a dad to this teenage boy? And this daughter of mine, she's coming up. My goodness, how do I be a dad to a teenage daughter? Chris, I'm telling you, most fathers find themselves in this kind of situation on a regular basis. So what we typically default to, is going back and recycling what was done to us. No, this is the way my dad handled it, and that's the way I'm going to handle it. Well, that might be good, or it might not. And so we have to begin by learning that we don't have everything that we need. I don't know what I don't know. I don't understand what I don't understand. I need to find somebody who can help me make this journey. Kind of like the relationship you and I have made over the years. It's just, I've got this incredible device right here called a cell phone. And I can reach out and touch just about anybody, any place, if they have a similar device, and they can reach out to me. And we even have this way to communicate where we don't even actually have to talk. We just tap, 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 send. And it's the safest way for me to reach out for help, because I don't have to, I don't have to actually ask, Chris, could you help me? I can text. Listen, it's so simple, but it's not easy. And so strategic thinking, strategic planning about the long distance, tactical thinking, how can I resolve this problem? What can I do to fix this or that? It takes both of them. It takes both of them working in tandem, working together, because without the tactical expression of getting things done, the dream will only stay a dream. At some point, somebody's got to do something about something in the physical world. And that's where the tactical comes in.
That's good. David, I'm reminded of the journey of my wife and I buying our home in 2017 that we love, and we're so glad that we did 7 years ago.
Yes.
Because I've been in real estate, so I have the privilege of 1099 income, and I had even though I was selling real estate, we didn't own a home. We were living in a duplex, a 2-bedroom, 2-bath duplex.
I remember.
For about 7 years into my career, honestly. And the challenge is I was making some boneheaded financial decisions, right? I didn't file my taxes the first 3 years of real estate. So by the time I got the letters, I did, and I didn't have any tax write-offs. And so it just accumulated over time.
Yes.
And the reason I'm sharing this story, David, is because looking back, once my wife and I got on the same page by having conversation about what we desired for a home to raise our 3 children in,
right,
it went to another level with me, and it created some internal pressure where if things if things were going to change physically, I needed to change what I was doing and change how I was thinking.
Sure.
And looking back, one of the things that I did that was actually wise is I went to a trusted expert in the industry, aka a lender, and to me it was like a very humbling experience, because I remember a reservation where I didn't fill out the credit application. I didn't want to, because I knew where my credit was at. I knew what was going to show up on there, and I had a level of embarrassment around it, especially being in the industry. But once I opened up and I humbled myself, and I said, okay, I'm gonna do this for my family. I'm gonna take that next step and insert a person that's a professional in that area to help me walk through.
Absolutely.
The beautiful thing is, David, is that oftentimes, I mean, you're my go-to when it comes to family dynamics, when it comes to my relationship with my wife, my children. You and I talk a lot about that.
Sure.
And the principle that I picked up on, whether it's a conversation with you about family or with the money man about money and finances, it's usually not as bad as I make it out to be in my mind.
Yes.
And nobody has ever came to me and like, Chris, I've never heard of this before. Are you kidding me? You're the only one. Usually they share a story where they've been through it too. And so they very much understand. And then out of generosity, they actually break down some simple steps for me to consider taking to actually turn things around.
Yes.
And I'm thankful.
You were learning about making the transition by someone who is equipped to help you do it. You didn't have to make that transition on your own, and you made the smart choice of connecting with someone, an expert in the field, so to speak, and they helped you make a transition that you probably couldn't have made on your own.
Yeah, because what I would have done is I would have just tried harder.
Yes.
But what I would have been doing is trying harder at things that were not already working.
Right.
And so by seeking out wise counsel, like I have I would say a board of directors for my life, and you're one of them. By the way, I don't think we ever made it official. However, congratulations! Spoiler alert: after a decade, you're on.
Thanks. I appreciate that. I'm going to put that on my resume.
3 white-haired gentlemen that are older than me that have some experiences that I'll turn to when it comes to making, in particular, big decisions in my life. So I would say out there, if somebody out there feels like they just feel like they're alone and they've been trying hard and it doesn't seem to be making the changes they desire, I would say, number one, be open to the idea of, I would say, God sending somebody into your life that's willing to help you. That doesn't mean they're going to come knocking on the door. You may run into them at a coffee shop unexpectedly, right, David?
Yes, you might. You might have a coffee shop encounter. Yeah.
That's right. Be open. My point is, be open to the idea of somebody a little bit older, a little bit wiser, that has some experience, that would be generous enough to offer some input that we can learn from.
Yes. And probably that person is going to be someone who has wisdom to share with you that they have
Mhm.
learned from their mistakes,
Right.
because that's how most of us older guys, if we have anything of substance and of anything of wisdom to say, most of the time it comes from the failures that we've had along the way.
Hmm.
And you know, we've learned that failure is not the end. It's simply a bump on the road.
Hmm.
And that's a great example, Chris. I mean, it really is. I can't tell you how many times over the past 20 years that I've had similar types of conversations with guys related to parenting and related to their relationship with their wives and related to job and job transitions and those kinds of things. And and it's because I've been through all of those things and have made plenty of mistakes along the way, and I've learned how, ooh, wow, that stove is hot. Ah, I'm not going to touch that again. You know, I mean, why do we insist on making our own mistakes when we can learn from the mistakes that others have made? And it seems to be a far wiser thing to do that way than to insist on banging my head against the wall again and again and again. Well, maybe this time it won't hurt. No, no, it's going to hurt, and probably more. So it the willingness to reach out and to touch and to reach out and to encounter and to listen and to recognize, you know, I am not all that in a bag of chips. I'm not. I'm a guy who has limited understanding and limited perspective, and I need some other perspective than what I've got, and I need some other understanding than what I have. And that kind of attitude, Chris, is one of the things that will lead a guy into learning how to do the things that we're talking about. Learning how to look out over the next year and to start thinking in terms of how can I get stuff ready to do this or that or the other, to think tactically, okay, preparing for my daughter's graduation coming up, okay, rather than 2 weeks ahead of time trying to scramble around, you know. Those are the kinds of things that are important to learn how to do, and then to begin to stretch out a bit more. You know, what about 2 years? What about 5 years? It is a learned process, and that's really, really important for me to say. I am not an expert on this. I'm just a guy who over the years has touched the hot stove enough times to know not to do that. So when I'm talking to other guys, I'm saying, look, if there's a hot stove, don't touch it. And that's where I come from on this issue of strategic thinking and planning and tactical thinking and planning. If we don't have both, we're going to be missing out along the way pretty regularly, because we haven't been preparing for what things could be, and that we aren't prepared for how things are.
That's good. You know, one of the things that's been helpful looking back is, once my wife and I in particular have clarity on a general direction that we desire for our future, it helps making decisions in the moment. Meaning that I could,
Yes,
like, the filter becomes, is this in alignment with the general direction that we're headed as a family?
right.
I recently made at the real estate office. I had a coaching and consulting responsibility that had a 20-hour a week commitment, and yet just thinking through it, I was thinking, okay, well, with there's a time commitment required, as I shared,
Sure.
and looking, I made that change about I don't know, a month or two ago to say no to that opportunity. And looking back, I'm so glad I did, because one of the things that I've discovered, David, is that, for example, our daughter Shaylee, she's in college classes in person here locally in the Kansas City area, and one of the things that I really appreciate and value now, and I know someday in the future that I'll even value it more,
Mm-hmm.
is that I'm not leaving the house be, before she gets up and heads out, where we have these beautiful moments together
Mm.
where I'm able to
Yeah.
interact with her in
Yeah.
the front room. And usually my wife's there and we're sitting in our chairs and my daughter's getting ready for college in the morning. And several days a week, instead of rushing out of the house, I'm able to be present with her and,
Mm.
have morning talk and all of that. And it's like, man, it's just the reason I bring that up, David, is because I've discovered that the more clarity and sense of direction my wife
Yes.
and I have for someday in the future, it
Yes.
really does help making those decisions, in the moment. It helps me filter, like, is this in alignment with the general direction I believe we're headed?
Yes, absolutely. And that
Yeah.
is very much in line with Brenda and my decision that we made before our children were even adults and
Hmm.
married, that wherever they wind up, we want to position ourselves in a way where we can be connected with both our daughter and her family and our son and his family, however those things develop and in whatever time frame. That is where we want to be. And when the opportunity happened, we just simply asked the questions, okay, how is this going to work? What is the time frame? How are we going to do this? But the decision was made. The logistics were the issues that we were concerned about at the time. And I tell you what, you're right, Chris. When a husband and wife are in harmony about those big picture kind of things, when a door opens or the opportunity comes about, whether you intended for it to or not, you're ahead of the curve. You're ahead of the wave. You don't have to worry about the should we. You've already decided that this is the thing we're going to do, but put the logistics together to make it happen. And that's a significantly better place to be than starting from ground zero.
Making a pre-decision. We
Absolutely.
decided.
Absolutely. Yeah. If the door opens, we're going through it.
Hmm.
And that's a better place to be than, gee, should we? The
Hmm.
should we question that's answered in advance, and you can't always answer the should we question in advance. It doesn't always work that way because we don't always see what life is going to bring us.
Right.
But having the communication, having that layer of relationship where you're working together instead of working independently completely, but you're working together on these kinds of things,
Hmm.
makes resolving those questions significantly easier.
Yeah, that's good. And it would be wise for somebody out there listening not to do, because I relate to your story about getting to a place of pain when you were 40.
Mm,
Interestingly enough, mine was approaching 40 as well.
something
And
about
yet,
that. Yeah.
somebody doesn't have to wait until they get to a crisis or this pain point in life
Of course
in
not.
order to start being more intentional about the planning and dreaming for their life. It would be
Yes.
wise not to have to wait till pain
Right.
comes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. There's no reason to wait. There's no
Right.
reason to say, well, I'll do this later. It's the kind of thing that you can begin now. You don't
Hmm.
have to think 10 years out. You can think 5.
Hmm.
Something that's a little closer within, I'm almost an old guy, so 10 years is nothing. when you're when you're a younger man, 5 years is a long time. I remember that 5 years, I couldn't even imagine thinking 5 years in advance. And so
Right.
the point is not that you follow my plan or my this or that. The point is that you start investigating and thinking and dreaming about what your future could be and
Hmm.
what could it look like if this and what could it look like if that. And not just have that as a one-time thing, but on a fairly regular basis, every month or two,
Hmm.
you carve out some time and you think about that.
Hmm.
Make some notes, put some ideas down. You would be amazed at what will happen over 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years when you're projecting into the future and you're asking questions and you're coming up with ideas and you discard some and you add some and you trim some of this off and you add some of that. Pretty soon you're developing a recipe for your future. And it happens, it comes, and there it is, and you're seeing it take place. I'm at a place now in my life where I'm seeing it take place. I'm seeing the opportunities to have these one-on-one conversations with guys, some that I know real well, some that I don't hardly know at all, but I get to know really well. And that is it's like a fountain of joy for my life. It's a very, very important part of what's happening with me, is that I have the opportunity on a regular basis to have conversations like this and others with younger men who are at a place where they really need to hear from somebody who's touched the hot stove one too many times, so that they can learn how to avoid that hot stove event and how to work around it and plan for a future that's going to be different than they could even have imagined. That's my sweet spot in life. And that's one of those things that gets me up in the morning.
It's good, David. So if somebody says, you know what you're saying is resonated with me, I'm willing to take a next step, and they're not currently putting much effort towards envisioning the future, dreaming and strategy and planning, what would be your next step recommendation to them?
Well, I would encourage them to find somebody to bounce some ideas off of. Perhaps an older guy that they know, perhaps someone they know at their church or school or neighbor or whatever. But just because someone's got gray hair doesn't mean they have a clue about what we're talking about here. Someone who has some experience, someone who has some relational experience in developing and changing and those kinds of things. It's going to involve someone else. It always will, because none of us are called to live life alone. None of us. None of us are called to well, you used to say, well, you're not going to, you can't be the Lone Ranger. Well, even the Lone Ranger wasn't lone. He had Tonto. Okay, so you need to find somebody who can listen to you and give you some input. And if you want the outline that I sent Chris on this stuff that I put together, I'd be happy to send you that. Chris,
Okay.
we can make that available. It's a
Sure.
PDF. It's very simple. It's just very, very basic, but it can help begin to point you in a direction or point you toward a journey that may be significantly different than the past 10 years has looked like for you. And the best way to make good travel time on a journey is to have some kind of guidelines and some kind of posts, some kind of map to get started. And that's what this would be.
Okay. David, you also have a podcast channel. Tell us a little bit about
I
that.
do.
What are you guys talking about?
Yes. I have a podcast. I'm involved with two. One is with my wife. No, not my wife. My wife refuses to be involved in podcasts. One is with my daughter. My daughter and I do a podcast called The 10 Things. The 10 Things podcast, and we've done 3 seasons. We've been off here for quite a while. We're getting season number 4 ramped up and going. I have another podcast that I do with a friend from Kansas City called the Learning to Thrive. The Learning to Thrive podcast. It focuses more on spiritual related things, Christianity, faith, walking out faith in life. We've just recorded 5 episodes of what is going to be season 3 for us, and this season is called Grace Thoughts, and it's 15 different ideas and thoughts that have come to mind with me over about a 20-year period in my journey with God, and each of these are going to be 15 to 20-minute conversations with Tom and myself, and we're pretty excited about that. But I enjoy doing that. I enjoy the opportunity I have to talk with you, Chris. It's always a fun thing, and I appreciate you having me on.
Give us a little teaser as far as Grace thought to let us know in advance kind of what we could expect if we click and check out what you guys discuss.
First of all, if you're going to listen to the podcast, I encourage you to have an open mind, because I'm going to say some things that you don't like. I'm going to say some things that I don't like. Let me give you an example. I'll give you 2 examples. One of the grace thoughts that I have, which is a real challenge to most modern-day American evangelical Christians, is this. It's very simple. You have never breathed an unforgiven breath, as far as God's concerned. grace thought number one is one of the ones we've just recorded, and that it says this grace thought has become foundational in my life, and it has actually changed my life. And it's this: you're completely and fully loved, accepted, and forgiven by God. You always have been and always will be. And nothing can ever change that. That's a little thought about God's thoughts toward us, a grace thought that almost 20 years ago began revolutionizing my life. And so that's the kind of stuff we talk about. Short, relatively short. The two previous seasons, episodes have been a bit longer, been laying some foundational things. We're tightening it up just a bit. I tend to talk quite a bit. You've picked that up, I'm sure. But it's a way for Tom and myself, Tom Kalinov and I, to put together some thoughts and to put it out there, and to see, we get some response, and we're not setting the world on fire, but we're having a good time with our little campfire.
Sure. Well, David, I'll put the link to the comments in the comments to your podcast channel in case somebody wants to click on it and check it out. Then also include a link to your social media profile in case somebody wants to track you down on social media.
Yeah, that's pretty simple to do. You can find the podcast and myself. You can Google David Higginbotham podcast, and I'm one of the ones that's there.
Okay. Well, David, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate your insight.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it so much, man. Talk to you soon.
All righty.